engine testing at Cambridge Airport. Cambridge Airport is located on the eastern side of the city. It's bounded by Newmarket Road to the north, Airport Way to the east, Barnwell Road and Colburns Lane to the west and south. The village of Teversham, which is within South Cambridgeshire, is to the east. The airport was first established as an aerodrome in the 1930s and operates a mixture of aviation traffic, including general and business aviation. It also operates the East Anglian Air Ambulance and occasional commercial and charter passenger flights. The maintenance, repair and overhaul of aircraft form a core part of the operations currently taking place at the airport. Aircraft engine testing is an integral part of this process. Engine ground running is the running of aircraft engines on the ground to test engine performance and aircraft systems. At present, the majority of engine ground running is undertaken at an engine run-up bay, which is situated behind an earth bund approximately 7 metres high, immediately to the south of Newmarket Road. Just show you a photograph taken from Newmarket Road. You can see the bund behind which you often see the aircraft which are being tested. Current engine ground running activities are not the subject of a specific planning permission. There are no formal planning restrictions on the current engine testing arrangement. Whilst the airport does have in place voluntary procedures, there is no mechanism to enforce these procedures under the planning regime. Last year, the applicant received planning permission from South Cambridgeshire for a new mixed-use development, including residential homes, on land to the north of Newmarket Road. Here. This development is known as Wing. The Wing Planning Permission included a requirement in the Section 106 agreement that all aircraft engine testing at the existing engine run-up bay should stop prior to the occupation of any residential development. Therefore, in order to continue with aircraft engine testing activities at the airport, a new facility for the testing of aircraft is required by the applicant. Full planning applications for a ground run enclosure for aircraft engine testing were submitted to the City and the District in January of this year. It's proposed that the ground run enclosure will be situated on the western side of the airport, adjacent existing aircraft hangars, to the south of Barnwell Drive and north of the main runway. The site is featureless, although is surrounded by a shallow drainage ditch on 3 sides. Part of the application site falls within the Cambridgeshire Green Belt. Just shown on this slide, this is the red line south boundary. The ditch is on the 3 sides, and the green slope here is the Green Belt, just a very small parcel of the new taxiway aircraft apron is within the Green Belt. The administrative boundary of the district and the city runs the black dotted line along here, so you'll see a very small portion of the application site falls within South Cambridgeshire. The lead planning authority has been the city, given that the majority of the application site falls within the city boundary. An environmental impact assessment has been submitted in support of the proposals under the EIA regulations. This is because of the characteristics, location and potential impacts of the proposed development. The EIA process ensures that any potentially significant impacts of this development are considered and, where appropriate, mitigated. The proposed ground run enclosure will be situated adjacent to existing hangars known as Hangar 21 and Hangar 17. It will comprise of a 4-sided structure with openable hinge doors, which will be built on a new area of aircraft taxiway that will link to an existing taxiway delta and ultimately the main runway here. The aircraft, once inside, will be totally enclosed, but there's no top on the structure. The ground run enclosure facility measures approximately 74 metres wide and 92 metres long. It incorporates a control room and viewing gallery on one side and fire access doors on the opposite side to enable emergency vehicle access if necessary. The enclosure will be constructed from steel sections and panels. Doors, vents and walls will be lined with metal acoustic panels. It will have an overall height of 20 metres. The rear wall of the ground run enclosure includes a jet blast deflector to redirect jet blast upwards and out of the top of the facility. You can see on this slide here. Air vents are built into the walls and doors to draw air into the structure. On this elevation here, you'll see there's 3 horizontal acoustic vents which allow airflow. I'm just going to show you a few photos of the elevation drawing here. So you've got effectively the front, the western elevation with the doors open with the aircraft parked inside. The rear here with the vent along the back here. Just wanted to show you some photographs of the site. This is the view towards Hangar 17 and Barnwell Drive, looking north. This is looking in a northerly direction towards Hangar 17 and Barnwell Drive from the existing taxiway Delta. This is views across the application site. You see grass and contains a grass, an earth spoil mound. That's looking across the site down towards the main runway. And again, looking across the site again towards the runway. The ground run enclosure enables aircraft to be run whilst engineers assess the performance of the engines. It's been designed to enable engine testing on the largest aircraft currently maintained at the airport. These are known as Code E aircraft, and they include the Boeing 777 and the Hercules C-130 military transporter aircraft. It's proposed that following testing and commissioning of the structure, all aircraft engine testing will transfer from the existing run-up bay to the new ground run enclosure, except in some exceptional circumstances which I will draw to your attention subsequently. To clarify, no variation in the amount or type of engine testing currently undertaken at Cambridge Airport is proposed. It's the intention that the enclosure will operate for a maximum of 500 hours a year. The applicant has confirmed that there will be no intensification of airport operations. The application proposal did include a set of operating restrictions and controls which can be secured as planning conditions. There has been very detailed dialogue with officers, technical experts and the applicant team regarding the precise wording of the conditions. These will be referred to in more detail during the course of this presentation. There have been extensive discussions and members will be aware from a previous JDCC briefing that the Council did appoint a specialist noise expert, Colin Cobbin, who is with us today. Turning to an assessment of the planning application proposals, this is a complex application constituting EIA development. In evaluating the application proposals, the guiding planning principles can be found in the National Planning Policy Framework. This sets out the presumption in favour of sustainable development. It encourages local planning authorities to approve without delay development which is sustainable. Taking each of the key issues in turn, dealing first with the principle of the development. Aircraft maintenance and repair and overhaul operations do form a core part of the operations at Cambridge Airport. Aircraft engine testing is integral to this process, allowing the airport to deliver maintenance and overhaul contracts on a range of civil and military aircraft. Whilst a small proportion of the application site does fall within the Cambridge Greenbelt, this is shown on the redrawn Cambridge Area Action Plan, the precise boundaries will be defined, the precise boundaries of the Greenbelt will be defined as part of the master plan of the wider Cambridge East strategic site. In any case, by enabling the delivery of housing development in locations close to the airport, the development is considered to justify the exceptional circumstances for development in the Greenbelt. Turning to the context of the site and its surroundings, the proposed development is a functional utilitarian building. It's being designed to achieve optimum noise mitigation at 20 metres in height. It's the maximum which can be accommodated on this part of the airport, mindful of current airport operational restrictions. A landscape and visual impact assessment was submitted as part of the application. This assesses the visual impact of the development in the context of the site and its surroundings. As part of this, visual images were provided of long views such as this across the site, where it's at the moment, and with the proposed GRE. This is the view across the site from Airport Way. You'll see on the photo montage existing hangar 17 adjacent the application site. The proposed GRE sits within that scene of existing tall hangar buildings which are seen on the horizon. This view here is across the airport north from Coldham's Lane. Again, you'll see existing hangar 17, and this is the proposed view with the GRE in place. These visuals are considered to demonstrate that the GRE would be located close to existing buildings which are already of a similar scale and size, and will be read against the backdrop of existing hangars. This would help to reduce the visual impact on the character of the area, and officers consider there would be no significant visual impacts or effects on the existing urban fringe character. Now, the size of this facility means that conventional landscape planting mitigation proposals such as earth shaping or large-scale planting would not be effective. The applicant has, however, agreed to provide additional enhancement planting along the hedgerows bordering the airport. This approach is welcomed by officers, as would assist in screening development in long views across the site. The application proposals are supported by the City Council and the District Council's Urban Design, Conservation and Landscape team, who have all been involved in pre-application discussions. Subject to conditions regarding the detail of the scheme, for example materials, the proposals are considered acceptable in terms of design, form and impact on site and surroundings. Turning now to issues of biodiversity, an ecological assessment was submitted in support of the application. This has been reviewed by the Council's ecologist. The development will result in the loss of some grassland habitat. This won't be replaced elsewhere on the site, due to potential risk to aircraft operations by attracting birds and mammals. However, other biodiversity measures have been identified, such as the landscape enhancement planting of hedgerows. This is considered to provide some compensation for the loss of grassland habitat. No significant ecological impacts from the proposed development are predicted, and no objection has been raised by the Council's ecologist. In terms of flood risk and surface water drainage, technical information has been provided which demonstrates that the development won't increase flood risk or discharge greater than permitted flows into the existing local drainage network. The Environment Agency and drainage officers at both the City and the County have considered the proposals and consider them to be acceptable. The proposed development won't generate significant amounts of vehicular movement, and there are no anticipated changes to the amount of engine testing or employees. There will be no impact on the nature or volume of operational traffic generated by the airport. No objection has been raised from the County Highways Engineer, subject to the recommendation of planning conditions relating to construction and environmental management plan. In terms of contaminated land, intrusive ground investigation surveys indicate that the on-site earth mound is a potential source of contamination, but the risks to human health are low. Further site investigation work will be necessary, but this can be detailed through the planning condition process, and the Environmental Health Officer has recommended appropriate conditions. With regard to local air quality, modelling has been undertaken to assess the impact in particular on nitrogen dioxide levels. The modelling demonstrates that there's a very small possibility of exceedance of the hourly average nitrogen levels when large jets are being tested in the facility. But the impact on annual average nitrogen levels is predicted as being negligible. The Environmental Health Officer doesn't dispute the findings of the assessment and is satisfied that the proposed development wouldn't be significant in terms of impact on local air quality. So this is subject to a planning condition to ensure that operational restrictions can be secured. With regard to issues of odour, typical kerosene-type odours associated with the burning of aviation fuel are already experienced at Cambridge Airport. The development has the potential, therefore, to generate odour emissions under low-power aircraft testing. The Environmental Health Officer has confirmed the acceptability of an odour assessment, which was submitted in support of the application and which follows established best practice. A draft odour management plan was also submitted during the course of the application. This is acceptable to the Environmental Health Officer in principle. Further detail will be required, which can be secured by way of planning condition. In undertaking an assessment of whether development constitutes sustainable development, noise is a key consideration. Aircraft engine testing has the potential to give rise to noise impacts on local amenity and affect human health. Noise resulting from engine ground runs is very specialist in nature, and there's no specific guidance relating to this type of noise. I just wanted to say a few words at this stage about the third-party representations which we received, because all of them refer specifically to the noise impact of engine testing on amenity. Representations were received from 14 addresses. These include letters of support on behalf of Fendilton and Tevisham Parish Councils and Tevisham Primary School. I've prepared this slide with the stars representing the representations and the approximate locations of where those addresses are. So the green stars indicate letters of support that were received in respect to the proposals. So here you've got the Tevisham Primary School Parish Council, Fendilton Parish Council. These red stars here are objections from the local community. The yellow one was a neutral, raising no objection or support for the scheme. In assessing the impact of development on amenity, you'll be aware, as I've already mentioned, that we appointed a noise consultant, Colin Cobbin, to provide specialist technical advice. The approach to the applicant's noise assessment was being discussed in detail at the pre-application stage and during the course of the application. Officers are satisfied that the methodology for assessing noise reflects the discussions which were held and has been carried out in accordance with specialist advice offered by Council Environmental Health Officers. We have Fiona Quinn here with us today as well, and Mr. Cobbin. So looking at an assessment of noise, by way of reminder, noise is most commonly discussed in terms of decibels. This is the measure of loudness or intensity of a sound. A logarithmic noise scale is used to express sound. You'll see from the slide, 60 decibels is the usual level of conversation in a quiet room, whilst 100 decibels is the equivalent approximately to loud music in a disco. Noise associated with engine ground running is already a long-established feature of the airport. The proposed development doesn't newly introduce this type of noise, but it seeks to relocate and mitigate it. An existing noise baseline was assessed at a number of sensitive receptors, including schools and residential areas. So this map here, the yellow dots show the noise receptors which were used to establish the existing noise baseline of existing engine testing at the engine run-up bay. The locations are spread around the airport. They're representative of sensitive receptors, including things like the wing development site on the Newmarket, off the Newmarket Road, and Tevisham Primary School. The baseline noise report identifies, as expected, a large geographical area is currently exposed to noise from aircraft engine ground runs taking place at the existing engine run-up bay, with variations in the level of noise experienced at these receptor locations. The baseline noise report demonstrates that engine ground running noise from the existing engine run-up bay is audible and also dominant at all these assessment locations. The maximum recorded noise levels during testing of the Boeing 777 aircraft, which represents the worst case noise scenario, ranges from 72 to 102 decibels. I've replicated this table, which is taken from page 45 of your agenda. The noise levels here shown at the receptor locations, you'll see wing development 92 to 102 decibels. You'll recollect that 100 decibels is approximately the sound of music in a loud disco.
Is this from the current site?
That's the wing development. So in red, that's the receptor location of the yellow dot here. That's the location.
No, what I mean is these
measurements. Noise levels at the existing run-up bay.
They're not modelling.
No, this is existing noise. So noise exposure from existing aircraft engine testing at the run-up bay is also demonstrated in the submission by what's called a noise contour plan. This is replicated on this slide for you. The areas of red shown on this contour plan represent areas of noise of over 90 decibels. The areas of orange that indicates noise from the existing engine testing of 80 decibels and over, whilst areas of yellow represent noise of 70 decibels and over. So if we turn now to look at the impacts of the noise arising from the proposed ground run enclosure, the noise impact assessment submitted with the application, it assesses the proposed operational noise generated from the new facility, the new ground run enclosure, and engine testing taking place within that. Council officers and Mr Carpen are satisfied that the assessment and the approach to assessing the predicted noise impact is very robust and that the modelling methodology, which is based on good practice, is appropriate. Another noise contour plan here shows the noise contour levels from the proposed GRE. So these are noise levels which are predicted when the new facility is operational. You'll see there's quite a difference in colours of the contours and the extent of the geographical area which is affected by high levels of noise from engine testing. The noise contour map in front of you shows that all of the receptor locations, those yellow dots on the previous plan, will experience a reduction in noise during aircraft engine testing at the proposed facility. There is one exception to this, and this is the Nuttings Road Uphall Road area, which is down here, which is a darker shade of green. This is this area down here, which is a darker shade of green than the previous existing situation. At this location, increases in the calculated noise level of up to 5 decibels are indicated. The highest noise levels under high power engine ground runs would be approximately 73 decibels. Now, this scale of change for this particular location is considered significant for the purposes of the environmental impact assessment, as this would have the potential to interfere with outdoor and indoor speech. But if we look at the numbers of the population which are exposed to noise when the engine testing takes place inside the ground run enclosure, the figures here again taken from your agenda, these are the worst case scenario, the B777, the existing engine run-up bay statistics show that currently population exposure to noise levels of over 60 decibels, there's approximately 4,000 people exposed to such noise levels. Compare that to the noise levels from within the proposed ground run enclosure, same scenario testing with the B777. So that reduces to less than 200 people exposed to, So, in terms of population exposed to noise when B777 testing takes place inside the GRE, less than 4,000 people are exposed to noise levels of over 60 decibels, compared, to over 20,000, I thought my figures were wrong, over 20,000 people as existing experience noise of over 60 decibels, compared to about 4,000 with the proposed GRE. Did people understand that? I'm sorry, it wasn't entirely clear on that. Okay. The noise impact of engine testing within the ground run enclosure on commercial receptors has also been assessed, bearing in mind that there's a number of commercial operations located immediately adjacent to the GRE site. These include the Quorum offices and Barnwell offices on Barnwell Drive. As part of the noise impact assessment, the impacts on these commercial receptors were evaluated. Overall, the environmental statement concludes that impacts at these locations won't be significant. The Environmental Health Officer has considered the conclusions and agrees that noise generated by the GRE won't have a significant effect on the commercial receptors. So if we turn now to look at how the operations of the proposed ground run enclosure will be controlled, it is an expectation by all parties that planning conditions will restrict the operations taking place. The applicant has confirmed agreement to all the conditions recommended by the Environmental Health Officer in their consultation advice. A full list of the proposed planning conditions are found on page 59 of the agenda. They have been agreed by all parties, including legal representatives. The key operational conditions are summarised on this slide. Aircraft engine testing will cease at the aircraft run-up bay once the GRE has been commissioned. All aircraft engine testing will take place in the GRE, and aircraft engine testing will not take place at night, Sundays and on bank holidays. There will also be a restriction on aircraft engine testing to only one aircraft at any one time. As part of discussions with the applicant team, common agreement has been reached that there will be some occasions which would warrant an exception to these operational restrictions, for example, in the interest of national safety or security. Where an aircraft engine test is required to be carried out under these circumstances, the airport has agreed that the test will not commence without approval of the airport director. And in addition to these controls, further restrictions have also been agreed. There will be an annual limit on hours of aircraft engine testing of 500. Aircraft engine testing will be limited to the hours of 8 AM to 7 PM Monday to Friday. And there will be an annual limit of 25 hours of aircraft engine testing between 7 PM and 10 PM, which may be required through the exceptional circumstances. With these controls secured through planning conditions, the Environmental Health Officer is satisfied that the application proposals are acceptable with regard to noise. Officers are also satisfied that the third-party representations summarised in your agenda have been fully addressed. So to summarise, the application would bring environmental, economic and social benefits. It will support employment and the economic activity of Cambridge Airport and also enable the wing development to be brought forward. It will also enable the delivery of homes, community space and sporting facilities on wing with their associated social benefits. In terms of environmental benefits, the development would significantly reduce the number of people living around the airport which are exposed to adverse levels of noise. Now, officers do acknowledge that there will be some properties which will experience an increase in noise levels of up to 5 decibels in the Nuttings Road Upwell Road location. This is a disbenefit of the scheme, but it is considered that it will be outweighed by the much wider noise benefits which the scheme will deliver. So to conclude, a balancing exercise has been carried out in accordance with paragraph 14 of the NPPF. This concludes that the benefits of the development proposal would outweigh the disbenefits. And on this basis, the proposals are considered acceptable and approval with conditions is recommended, with one small change to condition 18 as set out on your amendment sheet to give further clarification to the overall management plan requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is it a question of clarification? All right.
To be present, I only wanted to clarify. On the slide, it said that the running times would be Monday to Saturday, 8 AM to 7 PM, but you said, perhaps it was a slip of the tongue, Monday to Friday. Just wanted to clarify that it is Monday to Saturday.
Yeah, so just draw your attention to the conditions so that the hours of testing, condition 7 on page 61, to clarify aircraft engine testing taking place between 8 AM and 7 PM Monday to Saturday, no time on Sundays, public and bank holidays.
Yes, so it's so it doesn't include Saturday.
Thank you. I have one public speaker who is Des Taylor, Director of Marshall Aerospace, to speak on behalf of the applicant. Would you like to come forward now?
Good morning.
Good morning. You have 3 minutes and 30 seconds before your time is up. The committee clerk will let you know in a reasonable way. Thank you.
I'll be brief. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee on this important development. As you said, I'm Des Taylor and I'm the Director of Special Projects at Marshall Aerospace and Defence Group. And in the 3 minutes that I have, I'd like to focus the briefing on what approval of this application will and will not do, as far as we're concerned. What approval of this groundbreaking enclosure will do is it will allow Marshall Aerospace and Defence Group to continue business as usual. It maintains a fleet and supports mainly larger military aircraft like the C-130 transport fleet, as it has done for the last 50 years. Approval will help us to secure the future of around 1,600 high-quality jobs at the airport and around 7,000 indirectly in the local community. It will also complement the investment that we made 2 years ago when we spent £20 million upgrading the runway. It will allow us to comply with the planning requirements that will allow Marshall to work closely with the local authorities to provide 2,500 new dwellings adjacent to the airport, whilst minimising the noise and inconvenience to the new members and new residents and existing residents. And it will allow Marshall Aerospace to continue to be a good neighbour to those who live and work within the airport catchment area. What approval of this will not do is it will not provide any new capability or capacity to Marshall Aerospace Group that is over and above its existing capabilities, and it will not provide Marshall Aerospace with any competitive advantage by building this facility. Other considerations I'd like you to take account of is that engine testing is a vital final stage of delivering safe aircraft back into service. Without this capability, Marshall Aerospace would be unable to continue to support its long-standing customers, most notably the UK MOD, and to protect its enviable reputation around the world. Aside from safety, the foremost consideration has been to provide the best possible neighbour-friendly solution, and the proposed ground test enclosure is a state-of-the-art design which will minimise noise impact. So in conclusion, in light of the positive benefits of the scheme, in terms of noise reduction to the wider community, the delivery of 2,500 homes and sustaining 1,600 high-quality jobs, I'd urge members of the committee to approve this application.
Thank you very much. Right, so the item is now open to debate. Before we start, I just have a slight technical query on one of the little slides, and that was the noise contour, which seems to be very asymmetric. It seems to be a large sort of plume stretching off to the northeast. And I wonder whether that the one before that one, yeah. I just wondered whether that was dependent on wind conditions and assumed a prevailing wind from the southwest, and whether under different wind conditions much more noise would be heard by the residential areas to the southeast of that.
I would advise it would be affected by wind conditions. I understand this is the worst case scenario. My colleagues can
Councillor Brandon.
Sorry, I didn't want to, I was just registering a wish to ask a question, but has the answer come from the previous? Has the answer come to the previous question yet?
Was it?
Whether this is dependent on the wind.
Yes, yes.
Okay. That was exactly the question I was going to ask Councillor Bard as well, and I also wanted to ask about the slide that showed the resident representations that had come in, where there were green and red and yellow stars, and I wanted to know whether those were residents or businesses, those, because it seems to me that clearly Tevisham is likely to benefit from the existing facility being moved further west, because of course it's open. And so indeed I hear in Milton, I hear the noise of engine testing runs when the wind conditions are right or when it's very still. And my concern is that, do we know whether these red dots are businesses or residents? Because if they are concerned about noise, for example, on a Saturday, when they're trying to be in their garden, it's rather different as to whether they're residents or people who wouldn't be there at the weekend.
Can I answer that, please, Chair? So if you turn to page 28 of your agenda, section 9, the representations, there's 14 addresses on that page of the agenda. Those 14 addresses have been located approximately, there's a caveat, this is my own slide just for visual purposes. So the stars cross-reference with the addresses. The only commercial address on that list comes in from Barnwell House, Barnwell Business Park, but that was actually from someone who works there, who's written in capacity of a worker, and they're shown as a red star as well in this central area adjacent to the airport.
Okay, so we're talking about residents here. The other question I wanted to ask is, sorry, sounds obvious, but presumably, if you could go back to the two sound contour diagrams, the first one, obviously that one is, I imagine, we're talking about it being very much more noise in totality because it's in the current running bays out in the open. And I'm assuming if we go to the next slide, that the considerable reduction in fiery colours is because we're now in an enclosure which is acoustically baffled. So in theory, it's a big improvement. I also wonder, Councillor Bard, whether the directional nature of this is because that's the orientation of the plane in the enclosure.
Well,
And I just wondered if you could clarify that.
that's what I was trying to establish, whether it was due to the orientation or whether it was due to wind effects.
Can you,
So it's not down to wind effects.
could you turn your microphone on, please?
So the model is predicting under most favourable propagation conditions. So it's predicting under downward conditions in all directions. So the pattern that you're seeing there that you draw attention to is as a result of the directivity of the noise coming from the 777. Because with jet engines you have more noise emitted from the rear of the aircraft, but it's also a factor of the topography of that side as well.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Councillor Price.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And mindful that we've just heard what approval will mean, that it will help secure 1,600 jobs directly, 7,000 jobs indirectly, and some 2,500 homes on wing. And it will minimise the level of noise to new residents. However, I am seriously concerned about the shift, if you like, so the noise becomes closer to Uphill Road and Nuttings Lane, where it says in the report on page 54 will be significant adverse. I'm assuming it means significantly adverse. I'm in total sympathy with people that already live in an area, and Nuttings Road and Uphill Road are, unless they've all been sold through right to buy, it was mainly local authority housing. In fact, we've just built 2 homes ourselves on Uphill Road. And I think to justify that by saying yes, but a huge number of people are going to benefit from it. You've seen from the diagram there that the numbers of people that have gone to those that live near where it is now or work near where it is now are quite happy that it's moving away from them, and of course why wouldn't we? I completely understand that, but moving it away from them, moving it into another area where people already live and haven't had that level of noise, to just plonk it on them, I'm afraid for me, is tending me to not want to support this application.
Councillor Van der Vaar and then Councillor Meeker.
I wanted to ask about the usage when the wind direction and speed is doesn't allow the bay to be used, and to ask what impact that's likely to have. I would assume if an engine is being tested outside the bay and it is being directed in a different way, as in being pointed presumably north to east rather than south-west, then the sound is going to be directed towards the south-west, where most of the residential, where there's a lot of residential houses, and it will be much more intense than when it's in a bay, even more intense than the existing bay. There is no sort of restriction specified in the conditions, only that it's sort of historically there's only been 10 or so days when this has been relevant, which seems therefore we're relying on the weather carrying on in the same way that it always has to constrain usage outside the testing bay. I wonder whether there wouldn't be room, or has this been explored, the possibility of having some restriction written into it, what would the impact be if when testing happens outside the bay?
If I could come first of all to the issue of the engine testing in those meteorological times where you can't test within a ground line enclosure. That does happen. There are weather patterns which will dictate that there are a certain number of days each year, on average about 10, where you just can't do the testing within the air, within the ground line enclosure. Any testing that would take place not within the enclosure would form part of those exceptional circumstances time, so it would be covered by that, so it would be limited in terms of how much of that could take place. And in terms of where that will take place, there will be details provided as part of the conditions process, which we will receive information in terms of where those new locations will take place for those testing in those infrequent times where testing will need to take place outside of the aircraft GRE. Going back to the issue of significant adverse effects on the properties on Nuttall's Road, I'm just going to run back to the best. The point I wanted to make is that the Nuttings Road, Upward Road area already experiences high noise levels taken by the existing aircraft testing, and so it's not true to say that there is no problem with noise at the moment. It's a scale of change that will take place of 5 decibels increase from existing noise levels when aircraft engine testing takes place. So in terms of that 5 decibel increase, which takes it, I think it was 73 decibels that I mentioned, that the threshold within the facility, that is assessed in the environmental impact assessment as significant adverse. It's actually the wording from the environmental impact assessment. That judgment was taken that in that particular circumstance, yes, the noise impact on that particular area was significant.
Thank you, Councillor Lincoln.
Yeah, I mean, sat through several briefings and audio-visual tests and all sorts of interesting experiences, Chair. And sort of listened to Philippa's sort of comprehensive report and presentation. I mean, I'm surprised there's still a concern, to be honest. I mean, there are clear overall benefits to this application should this operation continue on the airport, and clearly it should continue as an operation on this airport, otherwise the economic effects are not to be welcomed at all, and the applicant made that clear. In terms of the sensitive issue of the noise issue, the contours, as I understand, are the worst case scenarios, so taken the sort of practical issue that the bulk of the noise will be projected out rear into the airfield itself. Yes, there'll be worst case scenarios where the wind is blowing in a different direction and there will be impacts, but on a practical level from a layperson's viewpoint, those times will be fairly minimal, hopefully, in a overall yearly sort of cycle. But the evidence is clear to me that the benefit overall for the local area is huge, and that shouldn't be ignored and should not be discounted, because people do obviously hear it on a regular basis at the moment. I think overall there is a clear not a noise benefit, and if you weigh that up then with the overall economic benefits and the fact that this is, as far as I'm aware, a prerequisite for the wing development to take place, and those of us who approved the wing development, I think, implicitly accepted that this was needed to allow that to take place. So I think in a planning context we know what we bind into, so subject to this being approvable in terms of the technical aspects, then I think it should be approved.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to speak very favourably for this proposal moving forward here. I think Councillor Benko has said quite a lot of what I was going to say. Yes, the economic benefits of the existing 1,700 jobs directly on at Marshalls here, 7,000 for district-wide. I think this is absolutely a world-class facility here, and we should be very proud of having this in our district here. I also used to be a member of the Marshall Consultative Committee years ago, and I was the chair of that, and we did set up a hotline there for complaints years ago. And I can say even before any of these proposals were looked at, the actual complaints of noise levels for Marshalls operating as it was then was so small, very insignificant numbers of complaints there for noise. So I think the net benefits of having a facility like this, yes, there is going to be a small proportion of residents who are going to have the negative benefit, but that could be in the worst case scenario. But overall, I think this is an absolutely fantastic facility for Marshalls in the greater area here. And Marshalls have been a good employer for Cambridge over the last 100 years, and hopefully for the next 100 years.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carpen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am also minded to generally approve this application, but I just wanted to ask again, as Councillor Van der Veer has mentioned, about the circumstances in which engine testing is permitted to take place outside the ground run enclosure. And it's described as being in conditions where there's insufficient airflow being able to reach the engines under test, and that's because the wind is coming from the north or the east. Now, if the wind is coming from the north or the east, that will affect more severely the people at Nuttings Road, because they are pretty much due south of this. So my question was, if it's not going to take place in the enclosure, it doesn't seem to be clear in the paper, and maybe I've missed it, maybe, where it will take place if it's not in the enclosure, because paragraph B actually kind of asks the question, but it doesn't actually say. It just says the alternative location or locations for out-of-ground run enclosure engine testing, including provisions for aircraft engine testing at different locations in different meteorological conditions and circumstance. It doesn't then say what, and I'm just wondering, I mean, that might have been a statement of what you were looking at, but it doesn't say where they will take place.
Yes.
Thank you. So you're looking at condition 13, which is on page 64.
Yes.
In that second part, B, if you look at the very first paragraph, so prior to the full operation after commissioning, arrangements for aircraft testing outside the GRE shall be submitted to and agreed in writing, and those arrangements shall also include details. B, the details shall be the alternative location or locations. So that will be geographical locations within the airport that will be provided to the planning authority for agreement as part of the planning condition process. It's the details that will be agreed as part of the condition process.
But we as a committee deciding on this are unaware of where that is likely to be, and thus we're unaware of who it's more likely to affect.
But the noise assessment hasn't assessed the aircraft engine testing taking place on those potential locations. It's assessing the noise impacts of the ground run enclosure facility and recognising that there will be times where aircraft engine testing will need to take place in certain other locations, but we have not got the noise contour information for that yet.
So I mean,
I'm
sorry.
But essentially, essentially, in those situations, if we're not satisfied as planning authority with obviously technical support that those locations are appropriate or suitable, then we can turn it down, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, I have no further speakers. The recommendation is for approval, and we're approving two parallel applications which are identical. So just to point that out, I'll take some notes. So the recommendation is for approval. All those in favour of approval, please indicate now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.